In 1993, when Blind Melon played on Halloween, some people thought lead singer Shannon Hoon was wearing a costume at first. But then they found out the truth. And Hoon was arrested as soon as he left the music stage. If you were a teenager or young adult in the early 1990s, you knew the music of Shannon Hoon and Blind Melon. Their hit single, No Rain, was a gentle ode to depression, and it came with an iconic video. But as Hoon's story shows, fame can be very bad. As a child, he liked music from the 1960s and 1970s. The Grateful Dead were among his favorite artists. The Beatles, in particular John Lennon, and American folk icon Bob Dylan, but when it came to making music himself, Hoon's first efforts were unexpected. His first foray into music was with a glam metal band in 1985 called Steph Kitten. During this time Hoon honed his skills as a lead singer and frontman, and before he'd even turned 20 he wrote the song Change, which would eventually find its way onto Blind Melon's first album. At the tender age of 23 he left Day in Indiana for the promise of Los Angeles, though he would eventually be one of the poster boys for cardigan-clad fuzzy alt-rockers. He was chasing a different dream in those days, still more glam than indie. In 1990 La had a burgeoning music scene with bands like Guns N' Roses having AEM merged from the glam metal scene in the city. Aside from being among the first songs Shannon Hoon never wrote, and his entry into the world of music Change ended up playing a huge role in his road to stardom. At a party in La not long after arriving, Hoon was playing the song, which caught the attention of Brad Smith and Roger Stevens. Smith and Stevens had also just moved to Los Angeles and wanted to start a band. Channing and Smith were so impressed with Hoon's song that they asked him to be their lead singer. This started the legend of Blind Melon. Before smartphones, you needed a video camera to record your life. Shannon Hoon loved recording his life starting in 1990, during his first move to Los Angeles, and while he was with Blind Melon. In an interview, guitarist Stevens talked about the kind of person that Hoon really was, saying, "He was crazy from the day I met him. It takes a certain kind of charisma and energy to lead a band, and Hoon's crazed personality was a perfect fit." Two more newcomers to Los Angeles were hired to join guitarist Christopher Thorne and drummer Glenn Graham in the band. The band began to play around Los Angeles and write music. They recorded a demo, which caught the eye of a lawyer for Capitol Records, which was a lucky break. Blind Melon were offered a record deal because the demo was so good. Some of the songs on the demo were tones from the upcoming album Home Paper Scratcher and Dear Old Dad. After signing with Capitol, the band went into the studio with producer David Briggs to make their official debut on a major label. But when they started recording their EP called The Siping Time Sessions, they quickly realized they were in over their heads. While recording, the band became unhappy with the results, thinking the recordings were too polished and didn't capture the sound they were going for. As a consolation prize, Hoon got to record with another band. He also got in touch with an old friend of his sister's who had also moved to LA from Indiana. Guns N' Roses lead singer Axl Rose asked Hoon to sing on the band's albums, Use Your Illusion. Even before Blind Melon became famous, these were two of the most popular hard rock records of all time. Hoon's voice was on radios around the world. He sang backup vocals on The Garden Living Let Die and November Rain. He also shared lead vocals on the single Don't Cry and appeared in the music video that took MTV by storm. A few concert appearances with Guns N' Roses solidified Hoon's place as an artist to watch out for. The hard rock scene in Los Angeles had been fundamental in Blind Melon's formation, but they weren't a hard rock band and they wanted to distinguish themselves from the metal and grunge movements that were sweeping the Pacific coast of the U.S. After their disappointment with the Siping Time Sessions EP, the band relocated from LA to Durham in North Carolina. It was here, away from the influence of the hard rock scene, that the band started polishing their pseudo-psychedelic sound in preparation for recording their debut album. After working with Rick Parasher, famous for producing Pearl Jam's debut album 10, Blind Melon released their self-titled debut album in 1992. Considering their Career trajectory. So far Han had high hopes, but he was in for a crushing disappointment. Success didn't immediately follow the album's release, but at the time music videos were a huge part of a band's promotion. It just took a little help from MTV to rocket Blind Melon into stardom. The lead single was Tones of Home. It didn't do well on the charts, and the band followed it up with a rather tender song about depression called No Rain. This song didn't fare well either. At first, the No Rain music video featured a tap dancing girl in a bee costume, and it took MTV by storm. All of a sudden people were paying attention to Blind Melon. The band were suddenly in demand, but this came with a downside as things started to take off for the band. The rock and roll lifestyle opened its enticing and dangerous doors. Han's life was more stable when he was with Lisa Kuss, the girl he met in high school and became his girlfriend. Kuss was from Han's hometown and was there for him as his fame and problems grew. During the band's 2 years of touring, alcohol and drug abuse became a problem. Han in particular had a lot of problems while touring with big names like Neil Young and the Rolling Stones. Han ended up going to rehab several times, which caused him and the band legal and personal problems. Rock stars like Shannon Hoon isn't the only ones who have given in to drug and alcohol abuse. The life of a touring musician can be stressful, and finding easy ways to numb that stress is part and parcel of the life. In May '94, Han entered rehab in an attempt to kick his habits. In July of '95, Han and his girlfriend welcomed a daughter named Nico Blue just as Han had finished another stint in rehab, and for a while it seemed like he was on the mend. The birth of his daughter had a sobering effect on him, literally and figuratively. H wanted to be a good father, but being away from his daughter made it difficult. Despite the distance, he started taking care of himself and avoiding the temptations of drugs as the band prepared to record their follow-up album. After relocating to New Orleans, Han and the band entered the studio to record Soup. The album featured horns, banjos and mandolins and showed a different side of the band. The lead singer Sing Lu was called Galaxy, which debuted on the Billboard chart at number 25, a respectable showing for a new song from a relatively new band. Unfortunately, the album failed to sell as well as the label hoped and didn't produce an MTV-friendly success like No Rain. Han was only recently out of rehab when the band went on tour to promote Soup. At the time, there was some speculation that he'd been forced into the tour before he was ready. There was pressure to tour the band's new album despite advice from professionals that doing so would be bad for Han's recovery. As a compromise, the band employed a counselor to accompany them on tour and help Han through difficult times. In the end, the counselor was fired after only 1 week with the Sup tour underway and the counsel are gone. The band did their best to give all the energy and enthusiasm they could to playing for their fans. The band played at the Club Numbers in Houston on October 20, 1995. Even though he had problems, Han was still a dedicated musician. His work and performances were important to him. However, his performance at Numbers wasn't great that night, and guitarist Christopher Thorne said it was because Han was high before he went on. On October 21, the band was supposed to play a show in New Orleans, which had been their home while they were recording Soup. Both Han and the band were disappointed by the previous night's show, and Han made a terrible decision. He chose to binge watching movies all night to deal with his bad mood. The last time anyone saw him, he was looking for more drugs on the streets of New Orleans. Early the next morning, he went back to the band's tour bus and got into his bunk to sleep off the night's fun. The next morning, the band's sound engineer went to the tour bus to wake up Han for a sound check. That's when he found something disturbing. Shannon Hoon, who was 28 years old, was already dead when the rescuers got there. During Blind Melon's short time with fame, Han tried a lot of different drugs that changed his mind, from an early love of cannabis to a hallucinogen-fueled Woodstock '94 performance to his alcohol binges. There are many ways that the singer's body could have died. Han was buried in Dayton, Indiana, and the band realized that their life and career as Blind Melon had been changed forever. The words to the Blind Melon song are written on Han's grave. 1996, a change in honor of Han's daughter Nico, who was only 13 weeks old when he died. Blind Melon released a compilation album called Nico. The album includes outtakes and demos and gives one last look into the charisma and artistry of Shannon Hoon. Of note is a cover of Stephen Wolf's The Pusher, with Han's own drug-related lyrics added. Hoon obsessively filmed all of his time with Blind Melon, including the good and bad times. In 2020, the documentary was released, which is all I can say. It's a final look at the talent and problems of one of the most unique and vibrant voices of the early 1990s. But it doesn't have footage of Hoon's most famous performance, which happened at the Pacific Coliseum in Vancouver in 1993. One concertgoer said that he thought the singer was wearing some kind of flesh-colored outfit. Hoon was actually completely naked in front of over 13,000 fans. In Hoon's crazy mind, it might have seemed like a funny joke, but when he started peeing on the stage and on some fans, the crowd started to boo the singer. At the end of the show, Hoon was arrested for taking off his clothes and peeing on stage. Blind Melon have sold over 3 million albums in the US and have been nominated for 4 Grammys for their famous video for No Rain. Their debut album went quadruple platinum, and the other members of the band were optimistic about continuing their careers. In 2015, Blind Melon went to Shannon Hoon's hometown of Lafayette for shows on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Hoon's daughter, who is now 20 years old, joined the band on stage and sang his first ever song, Change. If you liked this video, click like and subscribe for more amazing stories.